Hello, I want to make a quick video on the LG CX or C10 with Xbox Series X and go over some different settings to have it set up the best way for gaming. Um, Typically, you're going to be in game mode, but something else you could do is if you hit the home button on the remote, uh, go to home dashboard. Here you can go up to the settings wheel up here on the right, and then edit, and then the HDMI port that you're using for the console. Click this icon, brings up this menu, and if you put it into PC mode, save, exit, and then go back. This will allow the TV to do 444 chroma even on the Xbox. And from here, go to settings. So you want to have the YCC 422 disabled. That's only 8-bit, but everything else is enabled. And then this television, because it's 40 gigabit per second, HDMI 2.1, you can only do 4K 120 at 10-bit, but that really shouldn't matter. I don't think there's any games using 12-bit. And then from here, you could also change color space to RGB if you want. What this does is Microsoft words it kind of incorrectly. This is basically your HDMI range. Standard will allow 16 to 235, whereas PC RGB is 0 to 255. But I just want to leave that at standard. So the only real reason to put it into PC mode is, again, if you want 444 chroma, but that really doesn't affect gaming. So I'm going to edit that back into game mode, which is what most people are going to do. Just rename that to HDMI 1, save, and exit. So on your Xbox, you want this set to 10-bit, color space to standard. Your resolution, 4K obviously, your refresh rate, you can put it to 120 Hz, this television will do that, but there are some games that if you set it that way, it will run up to 120 Hz. So like Master Chief Collection just got an update, but it won't lock to 120 Hz, or in other words, the frame rate will drop a little bit, and so it won't be as smooth as if you just ran 60, but this television does support VRR, which makes up for that. So there just may be cases where there's a game that you don't want to be at 120 Hz. Maybe it lowers the image quality, or the dynamic resolution will drop more. So you could manually set it to 60, and then the game will just run at 60. But for now, we're going to leave that at 120. So this television does support Dolby Vision. The reason that it shows that it doesn't here, if you come to additional settings, FreeSync, you cannot have Dolby Vision with FreeSync Premium enabled. If you disable FreeSync Premium, and then go back, and then refresh this, Dolby Vision is now supported. That does not mean that you lose VRR. The television will still do 4 VRR. And as far as I've seen, no one can tell a difference between the two. So if you want that check mark next to Dolby Vision, then just leave the FreeSync Premium off. However, there's no games, and the Blu-ray player in the Xbox does not support Dolby Vision. It is only for your streaming apps like Netflix and so on. I have an NVIDIA Shield for streaming apps and a standalone 4K Blu-ray player that does Dolby Vision. So for me personally, I'm just going to have FreeSync Premium enabled and not worry about Dolby Vision on the Xbox. Sometime in the future, if they do add it for gaming, then I would disable this and have Dolby Vision enabled. But in the meantime, I have no reason to worry about it. I mean, if you're someone that's going to have an OLED television, then you probably want image quality. So you might as well get an NVIDIA Shield and a standalone 4K Blu-ray player that does Dolby Vision just to have best image quality, period. So for the television settings, for the non-HDR, just SDR, I have the light at 80. You can adjust this however much you want to get more brightness. The Xbox has this built-in calibration tool, so using that to make sure you don't get crushed blacks and so on and so forth is where I've adjusted the contrast and brightness. So let's just click on this, and don't know how well this will show up through the camera. But you basically turn this up, the eye appears, and you turn it down until it just disappears. So right around there. Then this one's for contrast. So same thing, turn it up, the sun's gone, then turn it down until the sun comes back. Also, before doing this, you want to make sure dynamic contrast is off. Super resolution, you don't really need for gaming. Gamma should be BT 1886. Color gamut, you leave it auto. White balance, turn on warm 2. When you first see it, you're probably going to think it looks yellow. It's probably because you're used to a cooler temperature. So let's say like warm 1, that's just blue. Your eyes may be used to that, and when you click on warm 2, you're like, oh my god, it's yellow, why would I look at that? In a couple days you'll get used to it, and this is more accurate. This is what white's supposed to look like. Anything else in here and under color management, you shouldn't mess with without a colorimeter and the software to run it. And black level, you can either leave it at auto or low, but you do not want to use high. High is no good. So with that at low, motion eye care, just leave that off. In game mode, all of this stuff is going to be off. Sharpness turned down to 0. It's HDMI source, you don't need any added sharpness. That will add shimmering. Alright, so with your contrast and your brightness adjusted, when you see this screen, the first black box that's within this white line should be equal to the black boxes that are outside of it, and then you should be able to see a step in gradation all the way along, and then on this side the white should be equal to what's outside of it, and you should be able to distinguish the one next to it. In this lower bar, that's just to see your banding, which can kind of make out a little bit right around here, but not much you can do about that. Alright, so for this color section, if you have a blue color filter, you can hold it up to your eye and then you can adjust the color and the tint from here. So I've already done this. If you weren't in game mode, the default 50 and 0 is pretty accurate. It's you maybe a couple points off, depending on each sample of the television. But in game mode, it shifts the colors a little bit. For mine personally, with the color filter getting it to 63, all of these, the blue and the white up here would look like one solid blue block, and then the tint, green 3, would make this look like a solid blue block. And that's how you do that part. Then back out of this. So now for HDR. Going to this will automatically send an HDR image. So now when we go into our video settings, it should switch to the HDR version of game mode. So this will push your backlighting to 100, contrast to 100, Brightness, I believe, was 50 at default. I just put it up to 54 to bring up the shadow detail a little bit. Generally, with HDR content, you don't want to mess with a whole lot of stuff. Sharpness, again, I brought down to 0. Color, again, game mode is just a little bit off, so I just clicked it up a little bit to 55. Here you can have dynamic contrast either off or low. I wouldn't go any higher than that. Dynamic tone mapping you want on HGIG. What that does is if you have dynamic tone mapping set to on, the television will try to do the tone mapping for the HDR. If it's off, then the system will do it, the console. HGIG is a collaboration between different television makers, game makers, and so on, so that the communication between the game, the device, and the television is better, and this will just do what the game says is right. Super resolution, again, keep that off. That auto. White balance, again, when you first click to this, it would probably, I think it defaulted to medium, which is just super cool. And put that on warm too. Leave those alone. Again, color management, can't do. And then again, because it's game mode, all of this is off. And for the Xbox itself, for this one you want to turn darker, or well, first turn it up to brighter so you can make out the different squares. Then keep going darker until it disappears and it's one solid black box. Then go one click brighter. For this one, you want them all to be the same. So right now I can make out the difference. Let me see if I can get the camera to pick it up. Yeah, the camera's just not going to pick it up. But you want to turn that up until it's one solid bright box. Hit next. Same thing here. One solid white box. Hit next. And now your game's for HDR are calibrated. And don't rely on this camera image. There's just no way that my phone's going to pick that up. What else do we have? So again, all this is supported, Dolby Vision with the exception, 4K 120. You want all of this checked, again, except for the YCC 422 and 10-bit color space standard. So the Xbox settings are all done, and your television should now be set up for SDR and HDR in game mode. Let me see if there's anything else to talk about. So with OLED, to prevent burn-in, you can put the logo luminance down to low. That should affect like HUD in games and so on, just the brightness of them. Screen shift allows pixels to crawl a little bit. And then you have the pixel refresher, which you can run if you see some image retention. Energy saving you want to have off. Eye comfort off. This is enabled by default, I believe. If not, make sure that it is. Instant game response, pretty sure was on by default on everything. This will automatically let the television know you're playing a game and put it in the game mode. Again, FreeSync Premium, we want that, or I want that off because on, because I'm not using Dolby Vision. If the Xbox is your only device and you're going to be watching Netflix and stuff from it, then you can disable this to have that Dolby Vision checkmark. Filmmaker mode, that's for movies, and you really don't want to be using that too much anyway, because I don't think it's as good as just setting it up yourself in the user setting, but that's me. For sound, I'm using eARC, so I have this set to, it only says ARC here. Go to additional settings. Yeah, eARC is enabled, pass through. The LG CX-C10 does not support DTS like they have previously, so you're only going to get Dolby Atmos sent over the eARC. And that should be all of the settings that you need. think there was anything else. So, alright, I hope this helps you out. I am going to be returning this television shortly. I'm going with the 85-inch Sony X900H instead. Let me back the camera up a little bit. I have a lot more space on this wall. And this television, again, it's definitely a little bit better in certain scenarios, quite a bit better in very few scenarios. But then in other areas, such as the possibility of burn-in, which really not too worried about, but also shadow detail, that's where LED or QLED and so on just kind of does better. But the size, always go with the biggest size that you can fit. I'm only 8.5 feet away or so, but even at that distance, I want the 85. But this is certainly a great television, supports all the gaming features that you could want. Haven't had any issues with it. The VRR blacklift issue that's known and LG's working on, honestly, I could barely tell it, in real world actual gaming. I don't really see it as much of an issue. If I could afford the 77-inch version of this, I would go for that, but getting the 85 Sony for less money is just better for my scenario. So anyway, that's enough rambling. Have a good one.